Hello, everyone. In this podcast, we are going to discuss the ways in which religion influenced the idea of Europe, the concept of Europe, and also the ways in which religion divided and united the European continent. At first sight, religion and politics might seem very strange bedfellows. However, as we shall see, they mutually influenced each other, and they have led to numerous cultural preconceptions and long-lasting geopolitical consequences. So let's get started. The concept of tolerance, which is still considered a very important characteristic of the European liberal order, came into being as a result of a series of bloody and devastating religious wars. Religious toleration, proclaimed as a principle of state governance in France, was a way to end the constant wars and to separate the idea of citizenship from religious denominations. Religion has also had a great impact on the geopolitical and ideological division of modern Europe. Dynastic wars with religious overtones shaped the map of modern Europe until the early 19th century and have been at the source of many ethnic and regional conflicts that haunt us even today. One of the characteristics of European identity that is often registered in political and everyday speech is Christianity. Christianity is usually regarded as a European religion, and as a religion that has unified Europe and shaped its character since the Middle Ages. Let's start with the first part of the claim. Christianity is a European religion. The paradox is that Christianity has become the religion of Europe, but as a religion has its roots in the Middle East and has been shaped by other Middle Eastern civilizations and religions and originated in the remote corner of the Roman Empire, which had its own religion at that time. The early Christians were persecuted, and there was not much hope that they would survive beyond a generation or two. Later, however, with the conversion of the Emperor Constantine to Christianity and his adoption of Christianity around 300 Common Era for the Roman Empire as an official religion, Christianity was brought to the center of the Roman Empire and became a state religion. 50 years later, another emperor outlawed all other religions in the Roman Empire, so by 400 Christianity became the majority religion, but only because it was endorsed by the most powerful political actor, the emperor himself, who was revered as a demigod. The Bishop of Rome, better known as the Pope, later took over this function of demigod and ruled over the Christian territories like an emperor. The Christian Church preserved the Greek and Roman heritage by copying old books, even though these were the documents of a pagan era. However, the Church recognized that Greek philosophy combined with Christian theology created a very powerful discourse. The Church anyway controlled access to these non-Christian Greek and Roman documents, as it indeed controlled almost every aspect of intellectual and political life. The Christian Church built its own infrastructure, had its own education and taxation system, and became the strongest institute in Europe, stronger than monarchies. Its unquestionable authority began to be shaken during the Reformation and later in the Enlightenment, a period with its rationalist attitude which ushered Europe into a politically and ideologically more secular era. But throughout the Middle Ages, the Church was the strongest European institution, as the rest of the polities, states, and kingdoms were either fighting among each other or fighting in crusades abroad. When the Germanic tribes adopted Christianity, the gospel of humility, with its original turn the other cheek and love your enemy attitude, became a militant religion. Germanic warriors became Christian knights and came to be seen as the athletes of Christ, atleta Christi, or the warriors of Christ. In the beginning, such warriors were given land by the king, which they could use on the condition that if the king needs them to fight in a war and provide an army for the king, they were obliged to be at the king's service. However, meanwhile, the nobility began to see the land that they used and cultivated as their own, and all the living beings on that property, including human beings, as their own property. They were responsible for the land and for all the people living on that land. So this put a limitation on the power of European kings, who did not proclaim possession of everything in their realm as Oriental despots did. Kings were not allowed simply to seize property if they needed material support. If there is something that distinguishes Europe from other civilizations, it was this idea of private property and individual rights, albeit only for a very few among the ranks of the nobility. Individual rights diminished with the rank people were born into, but in theory they provided principles of government. The power of the kings, even those who were called absolute monarchs, was limited. In early medieval Christianity lacked an intellectual tradition of its own and borrowed ideas from what was left from the Greek and Roman culture. When scholars in the Renaissance began to rediscover ancient and Greek and Roman documents, they tried to understand the ancient world in its own right, as it was, without the Christian overlay. They went back to the original sources. The Renaissance was not an anti-Christian or anti-church movement, but man would himself increasingly become the future measure of knowledge. What really shook the church first was the Reformation. The Reformation was successful mainly for 4 reasons. First of all, its criticism of the church was based on its own sacred text, the Bible, and reformers argued that what was not in the Bible did not really belong to the idea of Christendom. The Reformation criticized the church on the grounds of its own foundational text, which had previously been inaccessible to most believers since it circulated among the learned clergy in Latin, which only a few could speak. So the Bible. Secondly, the Bible was translated into vernacular languages and became accessible to ordinary people with a basic level of literacy. Third, the third important element is the printing press, which was invented a few years before Luther started the Reformation movement. The press meant that information could travel far and fast and could be distributed more efficiently and used for propaganda purposes. 4. Finally, the Reformation was successful because Luther did not end his life on the stake, as many other heretics had, because he was protected by some German princes who were unhappy at having to pay taxes to Rome, and found that the adoption of the Protestant religion would give them more sovereignty and autonomy. German Lutheranism spread over Denmark, Sweden, and Norway, and slowly half of the Northern European hemisphere became Protestant. England established its own special kind of Protestantism in the form of Church of England, which was the first national church in Europe. The adoption of Protestantism in many countries was followed by brutal, devastating religious wars fought between Catholics and Protestants. Religion did not unify Europe in those times, but bitterly divided it for centuries. And sharing a common religion was not enough to guarantee the peace. The Catholic Habsburgs of the Holy Roman Empire and the Catholic French were involved in seemingly endless wars of succession and territorial conflicts. The institution of the Roman Catholic Church had united Europe for a while and controlled the power structures until the Reformation toppled Rome's absolute authority. The 16th century was marked by civil wars of a religious nature. Mob killings, regicides, and religiously motivated hate crimes were the disorder of the day. These religious wars were also deeply intertwined with political interests and rulers who used religion to achieve their personal dynastic goals. Local rulers used religion to extend their political power. This series of conflicts was temporarily halted by the Treaty of Augsburg in 1555. According to the treaty, rulers had the right to impose their own religion on their subjects. This came to be known as the principle of cuius regio, eius religio. Whoever rules also rules in matters of religion. So the ruler did not have to conform to the majority religion of his people, but he had the right to impose his own religion on his people. This treaty was not very efficient, especially not in large states with diverse population. In no other country did religion cause more dynastic trouble than in France. This country was already marked with religious wars in the 12th and the 13th century, when the Catholic Church fought against the Cathars, who lived mainly in the southern provinces in France, in the Languedoc, and who believed in the Puritan version of Christianity, as the Greek meaning of their name Cathar suggests. The Roman Catholic Church regarded them as heretics. During the Albigensian Crusades, or Cathar Crusades, in the 13th century, the first half of the 13th century, Pope Innocent III initiated a war against the Cathars with the support of the French king, who wanted to eliminate his southern enemies. Scholars argue that the mass murder of the Cathars in southern France can be regarded as ideological genocide, an early form of genocide with ideological religious motivations. The church was brutally successful, and indeed the southern provinces of France became more loyal to the king, and the number of Cathars in the region was drastically reduced. This religious war, however, was at the same time a war between the French crown and the southern nobility, who spoke a different language, the Occitan, and traditionally opposed Parisian rule. Once again, religion and politics were strongly intertwined. Despite the increased power of the French monarchy, the differences between Paris and the southern regions did not disappear and would always form a threat to the French kings. With the spreading of Protestantism, the French monarchs were often caught up in the power struggle with various aristocrats who constantly connived against each other and the throne. The struggle reached its peak in 1572 with the St. Bartholomew's Day's Massacre, when a Catholic mob, encouraged by the Church and the Catholic de Guise family, massacred the French Protestants, known as Huguenots, who were attending the wedding of Henry of Navarre, a Protestant from southern France, and Marguerite Valois, his Catholic princess. Many Protestants came to Paris to attend their wedding celebrations, which offered a perfect moment to the fanatic fraction of French politics, the so-called dévots, to show how devout indeed they were in upholding Catholicism in France. Henry managed to escape and convert to Catholicism, also to protect his own life. Allegedly, he said that Paris is well worth a mass. Henry had the support of the politique faction of the French Catholic Church, the moderate faction, to which his wife's family, the Valois, belonged, and he became king in 1593. Once safely established on the throne, he was determined to end the religious wars and separate religion from politics, or at least reduce the role of religion in politics. He codified the situation of Protestant citizens in the famous Edict of Nantes in 1598, that was later revoked by his grandson, Louis XIV. Like Henry IV, his grandson, Louis XIV, also tried to resolve the regional religious and historical tensions among the aristocratic families and between the royal house and the nobility. But while Henry chose toleration and pluralism, Louis XIV, an avid reader of Machiavelli, chose absolutism. And under his rule, he centralized France and strengthened its outside borders. But more about this later. He allegedly said, "I am the state, l'état c'est moi," and indeed, the person of the monarch became the focus of all attention and power, which was his way to hold the country together. One major question during these French religious wars revolved around the idea of trustworthy political representation and good citizenship. Can a Protestant be a good Frenchman? Can a Protestant be trusted as King of France? Does or should religion matter when it comes to political representation or citizenship? Even though, to use the word citizenship, it's anachronistic for that time because people were subjects, but nonetheless, you get the idea. Henry IV's answer was that it shouldn't. Religion should be a private and not a state issue, and all religions should be tolerated. However, centuries after these religious wars, debates about citizenship, political representation, and religion are back on the agenda in the 21st century. Just think about the upheaval caused by the rumors of President Obama's connections to the Muslim faith, the commotion about the Muslim mayors of Rotterdam and London, or when recently the Romanian president rejected the nomination of a fully qualified woman of Turkish origin, born in Romania, to be the prime minister on the grounds that she was a Muslim. So, in summary, religion has united Europe, defending its southwestern frontier against the advancing Moors and its eastern borders against the Ottoman Empire, and also defining its internal borders. But religious differences among Christians have also been the source of disunity. Two versions of the same religion, Catholics and Cathars, or Southern Catholics and Northern Protestants, or Western Roman Christians and Eastern Orthodox Christians, have been at the source of many conflicts. A united Christian church reigned supreme in Europe in the Middle Ages, and since the time of Charlemagne, when the Roman Church was united with the military power of the Germanic tribes. But this also meant that the nature of Christianity changed and became an element of politics. In the long run, religion could dominate Europe, but could not really unify it. The rise of Protestantism made religious politics even more complicated, and despite the peaceful coexistence promised by the Edict of Nantes or the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648, Half a century later, religious differences have remained problematic, and national sentiments can still be manipulated with religious ideas. Despite the secular character of Europe, religion remains a hot topic in the public sphere. Let's end this podcast with a research assignment, and I hope you'll have fun with it. Look up the meaning of the words tolerance and toleration in the Oxford English Dictionary online, and think about the ways in which tolerance is still an important and relevant concept in our present. What does tolerance mean today in Europe? Are there regional and national differences regarding toleration in Europe? Explain these differences using a couple of concrete examples. Good luck with this, and I hope you'll have fun. Thank you for listening.